I never imagined that one day I would have the courage to expose what I went through, and especially what I became, because for a long time I wore such a thick mask that even I didn't know where the character ended and the person began. My name doesn't matter, because the name they gave me on the streets was stronger than any document I carried. They called me the Lady of Powder, and somehow that title seemed to give me a distorted kind of respect, as if I had achieved something admirable when, in reality, all I did was build an empire of pain on top of the suffering of people I never cared to know. I sold drugs like I sold air. I decided who would have temporary relief and who would sink into eternal addiction. The power I wielded over others filled the void of self-control, and each completed deal fueled a feeling of invincibility that made me believe I would never pay the price for the evil I spread. I didn't carry weapons out of fear. I carried them because I liked the idea that no one would dare confront me. The coldness I displayed was my way of avoiding the weight of the consequences. Looking back now, I realize I wasn't living. I was merely surviving within a scenario I myself had built, and whenever guilt tried to surface, I silenced it with more money, more addiction, more arrogance, until I believed that the absence of remorse was a sign of strength. Deep down, I knew I was completely lost, but I refused to admit it, because admitting it meant facing the truth. And I was terrified of the truth. I thought the worst that could happen was being arrested or killed, but something much deeper awaited me ahead, something I never imagined existed until the day my heart stopped, and I discovered what happens when God decides to interrupt someone's escape. I know this testimony has already stirred something within you. If you feel you're not here by chance, then stay with me. This channel isn't just for watching. It's for reflecting, for confronting what no one dares to say. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next testimonies, because each story is a chance to awaken before life exacts its price. If you're here, there's a purpose. Let's continue. In the beginning, it all seemed like an exciting game, as if I had been invited to participate in a world where I made the rules and no one could tell me what to do. The first time I received a wad of cash from the dirty hands of someone trembling before me, I felt something that completely overwhelmed me, a feeling of being seen, desired, feared, and needed. Drug trafficking offered me what I never found at home: validation. For a girl who grew up hearing that she wasn't enough, that she would never amount to anything, easy money seemed like the answer to all the wounds I carried in my soul. I wasn't just selling drugs. I was selling the fantasy of control. And the more money came in, the more I believed I was on top of the world. I learned early on that the streets don't respect weaknesses, so I transformed every bit of pain I felt into arrogance and a leadership posture, as if the fear I saw in people's eyes was the ultimate proof that I finally controlled my own destiny. The parties I attended were always accompanied by loud music, expensive drinks, gleaming cars parked outside, and gazes that desired me not for who I was, but for the invisible position I held in that underworld, as seductive as it was deadly. Adrenaline coursed through my body like liquid fire, and I fed on that. Feeling of power like an addict feeds on their next hit. I told myself that it was all freedom, when in reality it was a sophisticated form of emotional imprisonment. I didn't realize that every time I smiled in that environment full of smoke and empty promises, a piece of my humanity was left behind. I got used to waking up in places I didn't recognize, with people whose names I didn't know, and with the false certainty that this was living intensely. But something always accompanied me when I laid my head on the pillow. Silence. A silence that seemed to scream inside me as if a voice were trying to warn me that I was going too fast to a place from which there was no return. Over time, money ceased to be the objective and became merely fuel to keep my ego inflated. I wanted to be feared, admired, desired. The illusion of power was so addictive that I could no longer distinguish right from wrong, and the only thing that mattered wasn't losing the status I had achieved. I controlled everything around me, or at least I believed I did. However, no matter how high I climbed in that shadowy hierarchy, something inside me insisted on whispering that I was being controlled by something much bigger and darker than anyone on the street corners. And it was precisely that whisper that began to haunt me, as if trying to warn me that the higher I climbed, the more brutal the fall would be. Have you ever felt something inside you trying to get your attention before everything falls apart? Let us know in the comments if you've ever ignored a warning that seemed to come from God. The first time I delivered drugs to a minor wasn't planned, and I'd like to say it shocked me, that I hesitated, that something inside me tried to stop me. But the truth is, I was so numb with the feeling of power that I couldn't see anything beyond the money that would come in next. He arrived trembling, his hands dirty, his shirt too big for his overly thin body, his eyes restless as if he had already seen more than any child should see. He told me he needed that merchandise to help his mother pay the overdue rent, swore he wouldn't use it, that he would only make the delivery. I looked at him and didn't see a boy. I saw an opportunity. I didn't consider that that decision could mark that boy's destiny forever, and when guilt threatened to rise inside me, I drowned it with a comfortable lie. I didn't force anyone. The choice is his. I placed the package in his hands and felt a burning wave run through my chest. It wasn't remorse. It was a confusing sensation, a mixture of guilt and euphoria, as if that act had opened an invisible door within me. In the following days, I waited for my conscience to torment me, for regret to come, for the image of that boy to haunt me, but nothing happened. The inner silence that arose after that first transgression was so profound that it became addictive. The less I felt, the more I did. It was as if sin had anesthetized my senses, pushing God away and drawing me closer to something far darker than I could name. With each new involvement, the feeling of power increased and my sensitivity decreased in the same proportion. I didn't realize that at that exact moment, the door that opened within me wasn't to crime, but to the darkness that dwelt in my own soul. There's something nobody talks about. Evil rarely begins grandly. It starts small, discreetly, almost gently, as if it were merely offering a quick fix for an immediate problem. The first sin never seems destructive. It seems harmless, justifiable, and that's why it takes root so easily. I thought I had control over that life, but in reality that day, I began to lose control over myself. The scariest thing is that the real hell doesn't begin when you're completely lost. It begins when you stop feeling like you're making mistakes. And it was precisely at this point that something even darker began to happen. Because when sin ceases to cause pain, it is a sign that something within us has already died. As the days went by, something began to change inside me in a way I could never have predicted. With each new package delivered, each face I avoided looking into the eyes, each ignored plea for help, I ceased to be someone capable of feeling, and little by little, I transformed into a machine programmed to profit from the pain of others. At first, I still tried to rationalize my choices, telling myself that I was only offering something that already existed. But soon I even stopped caring about creating justifications, because the need to alleviate any guilt completely disappeared. Desperate people came to me begging, pleading, crying, trying to awaken a spark of humanity in my heart, and I responded with an empty look, as if none of that had anything to do with me. I said that the problem was theirs, that I wasn't responsible for anyone, that everyone chose the path they wanted to follow, and when someone asked how I could sleep, knowing what I was causing, I smiled and said that the money lulled me to sleep. The scariest thing is that becoming this way wasn't a conscious decision. It was a slow, silent, and corrosive process, as if each wrong choice ripped a piece of my soul away without me even realizing it. I stopped seeing human beings and started seeing only numbers, goals, profits, gains, and the more people I hurt, the less remorse I felt. I became an expert at ignoring the pain of others, and when I realized it, I no longer felt even my own pain. Coldness occupied the space that once belonged to the heart, and I began to believe that the inability to feel was a form of protection, as if I were emotionally shielded, when in reality I was dying inside. I saw families being destroyed, children losing control, mothers pleading for mercy, and none of that was enough to stop me, because I had learned to silence anything that could draw my attention to reality. Indifference became my armor, and emptiness became my dwelling. When people looked at me, they no longer saw a young woman trying to survive. They saw a shadow walking among them, feeding on the chaos and feeding off it at the same time. And I continued like that, believing I was in control of everything, until the day that God decided to show that the worst blindness is the one in which you don't realize you're blind. And it was precisely when I thought I was invincible that life prepared the most unexpected and brutal moment of my journey. I was already so numb to the illusion that nothing could touch me that I began to believe death was afraid of me. I walked the streets as if I owned every corner, every look of respect or fear fueling the fantasy that I was invincible. Perhaps that's why, when that meeting was arranged in an abandoned building late at night, I didn't feel fear. I felt excitement. The air was thick, heavy, and yet something inside me whispered that something was wrong. But I ignored that inner warning as I did all the others. Arrogance has a strange way of convincing us that spiritual signs are nothing more than paranoia. I entered the place with firm steps, trying to show control while observing every detail around me. There were cracks in the walls, a strong smell of mold, broken lamps on the floor, and a darkness that seemed to breathe. 2 men stood beside me, both armed, but I was so used to having bodyguards that I didn't realize they weren't there to protect me that day, but rather to witness the unfolding of my own story. The buyer was a few minutes late, and although I tried to maintain my composure, an unease grew within me, as if the atmosphere itself were trying to expel me from that place. When we finally heard footsteps in the hallway, nothing in me reacted. I was so immersed in the role of boss that I ignored the feeling of danger. The door opened without warning, and before I could demand explanations, a flash cut through the air accompanied by the dry sound of a gunshot that pierced not only the silence, but the false sense of security I maintained. I didn't feel pain immediately, just a warm impact on my chest that pushed me back. My body lost its strength. My hands trembled, trying to reach for something to hold on to, but the ground was faster. When I fell, everything around me slowed down, as if time was stretching before my eyes. Voices began to fade, as if I were submerged in water. I saw mouths moving, but I couldn't hear anything anymore. I tried to call out to someone, but my voice wouldn't come out. I tried to cling to life, but life was already slipping through my fingers. Blood warmed my clothes, and suddenly the only thing I could hear was the sound of my own heart beating weaker and weaker. And then, in the instant that the last heartbeat echoed within me, I realized that death was not the end. It was merely the beginning of a revelation for which I was never prepared. When my heart finally gave up, I thought everything would simply fade away, like when someone turns off a television and the screen goes dark all at once. I was convinced that death would be absolute silence, a total absence of consciousness, but the opposite happened. The instant my body stopped, something inside me continued. I didn't feel like I was dying. I felt like I was waking up from a long stupor. First came a strange lightness, as if an invisible part was slowly detaching itself, and then, gently and extremely realistically, I saw myself. Above the ground, looking at my own fallen body, I saw the blood running down my clothes. I saw my half-open eyes, my mouth trying to breathe something that no longer belonged to it. And the most disturbing thing is that I felt nothing while observing that scene. I felt no pain, no despair, no attachment, only a profound sense of strangeness, as if I were standing before a blurred photograph of what I once was, and which at that moment no longer had any value. I tried to touch my own body, but my hands passed through matter as if there were no resistance whatsoever. The sensation was so disturbing that it made me understand, without logical explanation, that this was not a dream, not a delirium, not a hallucination caused by blood loss. I was conscious, awake, alive, and at the same time completely disconnected from the flesh. While I tried to understand what was happening, I realized that the men who were with me had fled without looking back. They ran like animals in search of survival, leaving my body lying on the ground. I wanted to scream, I wanted to call someone, but I no longer had a voice, and realizing that no one could hear me was like feeling the weight of all the wrong choices falling on me at once. Then something changed in the environment. The air grew heavier, the temperature dropped, and a shadow began to form behind me. I couldn't see anything clearly, but I sensed a presence that didn't belong to this world. The darkness seemed to move, as if it had a life of its own, and suddenly I felt an invisible force pulling me back. It wasn't a fall. It was a slow, terrifying suction, as if I were being taken to a place where light didn't exist. I tried to resist. I tried to move forward. I tried to cling to anything still connected to the world of the living. But the force continued to pull me with greater intensity. It was then that the awareness that something bigger was happening hit me violently. I wasn't just being removed from my body, I was being ripped from my own history. And the moment I realized I no longer had any control, a question arose within me with overwhelming clarity. Where were they taking me? The force that pulled me ceased as suddenly as it had begun, and I found myself suspended in a place that seemed to exist outside of time, without ground, without walls, without a point of reference. There was no wind, no sound, nothing that reminded me of the world I knew. The sensation was impossible to describe with human words, for I was completely conscious, but without the weight of matter. Suddenly before me, a light appeared that did not shine like ordinary light, for it neither dazzled nor hurt the eyes. It was a light that seemed to have a life of its own, as if it were pulsating. This light approached me with such impressive gentleness that I felt something within me tremble, and at the same time, a truth took shape within my spirit. I was before a holy presence. As the light drew closer, I didn't need anyone to tell me who was there, for my soul recognized it even before my thoughts could process it. It was Jesus. There was no doubt. That brightness wasn't physical. It was a light that saw inside me, piercing through everything I tried to hide. He didn't look at me like someone judging a criminal. He looked at me as one who deeply sees the essence of someone who has lost their way. His eyes held no hatred, no contempt, but contained something more devastating than any accusation: truth. Before him, all the masks I had built throughout my life simply crumbled. There was no possible defense, no argument, because there, before that gaze, I finally saw who I truly was. When I tried to speak, to explain my choices, my own voice disappeared. I wanted to justify my actions, to say that I was hurt, that I only did what was necessary to survive, but no words came out. It was as if my spirit knew that any attempt at an excuse would be a lie in the face of so much love and so much truth. It was at that moment that images began to appear around me. They weren't loose memories, but complete scenes of people I had destroyed along the way. And I watched the repercussions of my actions as someone forced to confront their own history, unfiltered, uncut, undistorted. Each face that appeared was a revelation of the damage I had caused. And Jesus remained there, in silence, simply allowing me to see what I never wanted to see. I didn't need him to say anything. His mere presence was the judgment. Because in the face of light, darkness doesn't need to be condemned. It reveals itself. When the images faded, I was still standing before that light that seemed to breathe, and although I wished to remain there forever, something began to change around me so slowly and unsettlingly that it took me a few seconds to realize what was really happening. The luminosity that filled everything around me began to diminish, as if being withdrawn, not abruptly, but like someone pulling back a curtain with extreme delicacy. And the sensation this caused within me was more terrifying than any threat I had ever faced in my life. I had spent years with guns pointed at me. I had run from police officers. I had confronted rival drug dealers. But none of those situations caused me the dread I felt when I realized that the presence of Jesus was receding. That receding was not merely visual, it was emotional, spiritual, existential, and the pain that gripped my being did not come from the body I had left behind. It came from the soul that for the first time perceived what it meant to exist far from the source of all life. As the light faded, a darkness began to fill the space. Not an ordinary darkness, but one that seemed to have depth, weight, and will. I began to be pulled into this darkness as if it were conscious, as if it knew that I no longer had the right to remain where Jesus was. I tried to approach the light. I tried to reach out my hands, to plead, to scream. But in this dimension, no words were necessary, because the judgment had already taken place. It was not Jesus' words that condemned me. It was my own story reflected before him. With every inch I was pulled, the pain increased, not physical pain, but a pain that seemed to tear my soul apart. For the first time, I understood that the true punishment was not the fire, not screams, not physical suffering, but the total absence of God. Darkness began to close in around me, and the closer it came, the more I heard sounds that weren't quite sounds. They were laments, regrets, pleas from voices that seemed to come from all sides at once, like echoes of lives that had the same chances I had and wasted them. That place smelled of abandonment, as if it were made entirely of everything that people rejected when they had the opportunity to choose God's love. I wanted to close my eyes, but there I had no eyelids, no body, no defense, and the darkness forced me to see every detail of everything I had done. It was then that, like a whisper that crosses any barrier, Jesus spoke only one phrase that didn't reach my ears, but my spirit. You didn't just destroy lives, you destroyed destinies. And at that moment I understood that hell is not a punishment imposed by God. It is the ultimate consequence of a life that chose to walk without him. When the darkness seemed ready to engulf me completely, something happened that changed everything. It wasn't a cinematic miracle. There wasn't a bang, or an intense light tearing through the darkness, but rather an interruption, as if someone had pressed an invisible button, and suddenly the movement ceased. I remained suspended in that void for a time I can't measure, until out of nowhere, I felt as if I were being pulled back, not by the darkness, but by a contrary force, gentle and firm, that rescued me without explaining why. The sensation was so abrupt that when I opened my eyes again, I was lying in a hospital bed, with tubes connected to my body, machines beeping, and people rushing around me trying to stabilize something I already knew was over. When I realized I was alive, the tears came before understanding. I wasn't crying from fear, nor from pain, but from gratitude, because I understood that I hadn't returned to continue the same story. I had returned to write another. I felt such deep shame that I couldn't look anyone in the eye, and the first thing I did when I could speak was to ask for forgiveness. I asked forgiveness from the doctors, the nurses, the people I had hurt, and especially from God, because I knew that even undeservedly, he had given me back my life. From that day on, I no longer wanted to be remembered as the Lady of the Dust. I wanted to be remembered as someone who was saved when all seemed lost. I sought out the families I had destroyed. Some rejected me, others insulted me, but I remained there, asking for forgiveness, because I understood that true repentance is not a feeling, it's a decision accompanied by actions. I denounced the schemes, abandoned the drug trade, and began a slow and painful process of reconstruction, not to repay the debt, because that could never be repaid, but to honor the opportunity God gave me when He pulled me from the darkness. I returned not because I deserved to live. I returned because He decided to give me a second chance. When I finally managed to look back honestly, I understood that my story was never about drug trafficking, money, or power, but about the distance I created between myself and God while believing I was in control of my own life. Today, I understand that true hell is not a place of fire and physical torment as many imagine, but rather the complete absence of His presence. To live far from God is to walk aimlessly, to believe that one controls one's own destiny, while in reality, one sinks deeper and deeper into choices that destroy the soul. When I was in that place of darkness, I didn't see demons torturing me. I felt the despair of existing without God, and that realization was more devastating than any pain I could have felt. There I understood that hell is not God punishing someone. Hell is the consequence of having chosen to ignore Him throughout life. I returned with the certainty that I cannot force anyone to believe. I cannot force anyone to change their life, but I can tell a truth that has burned within me since the day I was snatched from death. No one can deceive God. You can hide your vices, your faults, your sins, your lies, even from yourself, but you can never hide them from the one who sees the heart. God doesn't want perfection. He wants surrender. He doesn't want speeches. He wants truth. He doesn't want isolated efforts. He wants relationship. If you feel you've lost your way, if you carry guilt that you try to drown in silence, know that God is still calling you. No matter how far you've strayed, no matter how many times you've failed, no matter the size of the desert you face, He's still looking for you. If this story moved you, leave a comment saying, "God spoke to me today." And before leaving, subscribe to the channel, not to support a video, but to walk with messages that can transform your story, as God transformed mine.